Welcome to the Hinda Institute Hinda Heroes broadcast, where every month we interview a Hinda hero and learn more about the American criminal justice system. I have with me today David, a real success story and one of our Hinda heroes, and we're going to interview David today. Welcome, David.
Welcome, Abby. It's great to be here. It's great to be here, and it's a pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
So, David, we want to get a sense of who you are. Can you tell us a little bit of your life before you encountered the criminal justice system? What were you doing?
Well, I was a man living in the North Shore of Chicago, in various suburbs. In 1987, I was married, had two beautiful girls, and we lived in the North Shore for approximately 20 years. I was raised there as well by my mother, father, and I have one sibling, a sister who's a few years younger than me. I became an attorney in 1987 as well, and I practiced law in Chicago in both state and federal court. I was a member of the federal trial bar in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals in Illinois as well, from 1987 till 2007. Though in private practice and working for a variety of firms up until 1997. In 1997, I took a job. I changed careers, if you will, and became the CEO of a startup biotechnology company, a development company developing rapid diagnostic medical tests. My major role there was to raise the necessary funding for the company. We, over a 10-year period, raised $55 million for research and development of these variety of tests. And in that process, several federal securities laws were violated, which led to a Securities and Exchange Commission civil action against the company and myself. And ultimately that morphed, or that transformed into or led to a criminal indictment.
Yes.
In 2006, and in 2008, I was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison, serving almost 11 years, where I was released in April of 2019.
So can you talk to me a little bit? You told me a little bit of how you encountered the criminal justice system. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about the court case and what was it like to be incarcerated and your challenges, and maybe some of your joys and opportunities as well through the process?
The court case was a very long and protracted matter. It began, as I mentioned, as a civil matter in beginning of 2003, and concluded in 2008. So the investigation period in the case went for 5 years approximately, and I was under a great deal of stress, because I was continuing in my role with the company at that point, and continue with my fundraising responsibilities under that cloud.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stress because there were a number of changes in the company. There was a particular local news reporter who was blogging on our company very, very negatively, and very negatively about me. So it was just a tremendous amount of pressure.
Yeah.
Ultimately, when I left the company, I then, and this was, right after my indictment, I was able to gain employment with the company I'm with today, and we can talk about that, which was really a miracle, because the CEO of my current company, where I am today after leaving prison after 11 years, took me on at that time while I was under indictment as his in-house legal counsel and vice president of new business development to launch a new product line,
Right.
Security product company.
Right.
And, but it was a very difficult time, obviously very, very difficult for my family, very, very challenging, and very, very difficult time for my wife, for my children, for my parents, for my sister.
Right.
This isn't a situation that comes up terribly often in the North Shore suburbs of Chicago. So
No, I think you'd be surprised, David, but it sounds like you were under a lot of stress for a very long period of time, but were a very hard worker.
Well, I was, but to
successful in
the
your career.
detriment of my family, unfortunately, because even though I was My children will always recall that I was at every one of their events. I might have been there physically, but I really wasn't present for them. And strangely enough, and ironically enough, when I went to prison, our relationship from my perspective, and I think they'd agree in many respects, grew stronger, largely because when we communicated, although often by phone, ultimately, when I first entered prison, there was no email in the federal system. That became available a year after my incarceration. At that point, that first year, we were only writing letters. Thereafter, we were calling quite often, I would say 2-3 times a week.
Right.
We all know the challenges, or not, I shouldn't say we all, many of us in the system know the challenges of even being able to get to a phone and speak for 15 minutes. It oftentimes involves lines and wait periods for 30 minutes to an hour.
Right.
But we spoke a lot, we visited quite often, and frankly, I have to say that I think our relationships grew stronger than ever, mainly because I was present for them. I was
Yeah.
not present for them those years of my life when I was living with them, because I chose to not be present. It was my choice. I chose to be working, crazily and irrationally, as I look back in many respects, and it wasn't healthy for them
Right.
or for me. So
Right. It sounds like you've changed that perspective now, David.
I'm trying to balance more, but we'll talk about the challenges post-incarceration, and there have been
Yeah.
challenges. But one of the things that I've recognized is that the most important thing in the end is remaining close to your family and connected in a meaningful way. So
Right.
that was
I
one of
want
my
you to
greatest
tell
lessons.
me a little bit about what it was like to be incarcerated for you, your challenges, your opportunities, your joys. How did you keep busy? What's it like in prison?
Well, one of the things, Abby, I would say at the outset, it's something I regret that I didn't include in my speech for the Hinda Hero Award that you so kindly bestowed upon me, was I was going to add the comment at the end of my speech, and I didn't, and I regret it, but that's that in the almost 11 years that I served in variety of federal prisons, never once did I experience joy. I mean, I never felt joy analogous to what I experienced in my real life, in the real world, with my children, with my family, anything that I could say approached true joy. But one of the reasons I became involved very early on, actually 2 weeks into the prison term, of assisting other inmates with their legal needs, is even being able to provide those inmates with any semblance of hope, in particular legal matters, for me, created the closest thing to me of gaining satisfaction and the closest thing I could say of joy that I experienced. And I was blessed and able to be able to do that from that 2-week period until the day I left. I would say to you, honestly, 30 to 40 hours a week. I mean, I was busy all the time helping people. One of the reasons I was busy helping people that often was because charging them money was a complete afterthought. That wasn't the focus. And in a prison setting, you have these jailhouse lawyers, most of whom never went to law school, and most of them didn't even go to college or even get a high school diploma. But they've been in prison so long that they claim to be legal experts, and they're doing write-ups for different inmates, but charging real money. I'm talking about thousands of dollars. Never once did I do that. So knowing I was a lawyer, knowing I was committed to helping and charging very little, needless to say, I was very busy. And I continue in that role today, both for the Hinda Institute, but also I get calls quite often from prisons around the country where I continue to assist inmates.
Right. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, David. I wanted to hear more about some of the challenges in prison. How was it difficult for you? What was difficult about being in a correctional institution?
Very, very eye-opening. The first week I was in prison, I was watching a movie in one of the movie rooms, and midway through the movie, one of the inmates, who's one of the control people of the televisions, if you will, just changed the channel without asking anyone. So immediately I said to myself, you know what? I've never seen anything like that before. I don't think I'll ever watch another movie, because what good is it to start with a movie and not be able to finish it? These are the type of oddities. I also at times, had very challenging roommates, if you will, bunkmates, from different religious denominations that didn't care for Jewish people. One in particular where he got very physical with me in the middle of the night while I was sleeping. Those are really outliers, though. It was rare. I mean, by and large, it was very smooth sailing for me. Why? Because I early on gained a reputation that, you really can't fool people in prison. I mean, they know who you are pretty quickly. So they knew I was a guy who was willing to help people. So I had a lot of respect for most people in that sense. And respect goes a long way in a prison setting. Remember too, though, that I was also in minimum and low security prisons. Had I been a higher level, it's hard to say how that would have played out.
Right.
But you know, by and large, for me, it was smooth sailing. The most challenging thing in and of itself, though, was the time. I would have really struggled greatly because I'm not a person with many hobbies had I not done the legal work and been committed to, you know, staying on course with that. And I became in tremendous physical condition as well in prison, the best shape of my life. I really committed myself to my health and staying in shape. So between working out and doing the legal work, I stayed very busy and had a routine that stayed very disciplined and comfortable for me through all of those almost 11 years.
Kept you sane. Did you have any encounters with Judaism while you were in the Correctional
Very
Institute?
much, very much so. And I became very close, as I've mentioned, to Rabbi Scheinman with Rabbi Goldstein, who's the leader of the Chabad in Ann Arbor, Michigan, at the university there. We became very close, and I actually just spoke to him recently. I really enjoyed the holidays very much. Purim was my favorite because we actually danced and had fun, which we talk about joy. I mean, I actually enjoyed that. I mean, there was a little bit of joy there. Yes. Passover was great. You know, I just, I went to every service. I went to, you know, every week the rabbi came, I was present, you know, so it was nice. It was very nice. Now, at FCI Morgantown, the minimum security camp I was at, that was the second prison I was at. They actually had a regular minyan every Saturday. And my job was to wake everyone up to make sure we had the minyan. But it was nice. It was really nice. I mean, we had a Torah, which not every prison has, and it was really nice. We had a lot of very observant Orthodox inmates at that prison. And so I learned a lot as well. It was great. I mean, it was that part of it. I think that really made a big difference for me, actually, connecting more significantly with my Jewish religious knowledge. And also, again, culturally, I grew up very Jewish. So just being able to be with the Jewish guys, you know, once or twice a week without any other interferences was very helpful.
So what would you say is the biggest value or benefit you got out of being in a correctional institution in one sentence?
Learning about my resilience and my strengths, you know, that I could get through it and actually, you know, get through it in a positive way. I mean, I think I've come out of it a different person. There have been significant struggles for me having come out in terms of adjustments.
Right.
Studies have been done on those who've been incarcerated more than 10 years, and those who have been incarcerated more than 10 years oftentimes struggle with reassimilation, reintegration challenges, and I have.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Hard to pinpoint it, but what I would say to you is more anxious and fearful in general in what I'm seeing in day-to-day life and how I'm reacting to it than when I was before I was incarcerated. And I think a lot of that ties into what is typically called being institutionalized. And I'm not going to suggest that I am institutionalized in a way that others would recognize, but something has happened in a change in me that is related to that because I just feel, the way I would put it to you is I feel oftentimes out of sorts, and I never felt quote unquote out of sorts before I went to prison. So
Right.
it's been a real tough time for me. It's hard to put my finger on exactly what
No,
that means. But
we call that post-incarceration syndrome or an adjustment disorder. A lot of our people have it.
yeah, I think that's probably correct.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a certain type of trauma, prison.
Yeah.
And so how did you rebuild your life when you came out?
So I was very fortunate to have two things: tremendous family love and support, and the support of my current employer, who employed me while under indictment and brought me back unexpectedly 11 years later. I say unexpectedly because even though he had talked before I left about possibly having me come back, number one, I wasn't sure I would want to. And number two, I wasn't sure, or he wasn't sure he'd have an opening when I came out. And both the opening was there when I came out because I came to see him one day when I was in the halfway house. and looking for, or requesting kindly that he be a referral source for me when I'm looking for a position. And he said, why don't you just come back? Because I'm actually would like to have you back now, because I'm not terribly satisfied with the person who's performing in the role that you would be taking on. It's a sales management role. So
You immediately
it
found
worked out.
employment. You immediately found employment.
Well, 3 months after my exit from prison.
Right. And how has the reunion been with your family?
Really very, very strong. I mean, with my children, very, very strong, with my mother, very strong, who's been very supportive throughout, and with my sister, who's been tremendously supportive, and her family. So very, very supportive.
Wow,
Very blessed.
you're really lucky that you had all these employment, family. Not everybody has that.
I also had a very serious health challenge. I had prostate cancer. On my 50th birthday was actually the diagnosis.
While you were incarcerated?
3 years into my incarceration. So
Oh my
that was challenging, because to be alone when you're going through that kind of period in your life is a bit challenging. But again, I had tremendous family support, which brought me through as well.
Did you feel you got appropriate care within the correction?
Very fortunate in that regard. In fact, it's rare from what I understand, but I actually was given a choice whether to go to a federal prison hospital or to stay at the federal prison camp I was at and be transported daily for radiation treatment at the University of West Virginia Cancer Center, which is very acclaimed, as it turns out, and I received tremendous care. And I've been in remission for 11 years at this point.
Oh, wow. That's
And
wonderful.
the initial diagnosis was grim. So I became very fortunate, and I think about this quite often, actually, that the urologist who gave me the diagnosis at the hospital said I had an 88% chance at that moment that it had spread to my bone and my brain. And had it would have been a death sentence. I mean, a certainty. It would have been a stage 4 diagnosis in this particular cancer, but this one in particular, with this diagnosis, it would have been. And I had a brain and bone scan about 3 weeks later, and I was in that 12%, and I was clear. So the diagnosis was much less bleak at that point, and the treatments were very successful. Thank God.
Right. It sounds like you had a lot of miracles and a lot of positive experiences on what is a challenging journey. Maybe describe a little bit of your life now. Like, what are the joys and challenges you experience now in your life?
The joys for me are all family related. The challenges are that I'm basically alone, other than with my family. I have found it very difficult to connect with a lady friend, a girlfriend. I found it difficult to even spend time with my old friends in a way that's very comforting. I feel that I'm a different person today, and I came back into the world with people who, and this is no criticism, but they're the same people. I'm a different person. So I feel like a foreigner in a foreign land, and it's uncomfortable for me. So it's been very challenging in terms of developing a personal life. And I'm an outgoing person. I'm a person who needs to be around people. I'm not a loner. So that's been very, very difficult for me. And,
Right.
I hope that in time I find solutions to that.
You really have had some unique experiences that no one has gone through and really won't understand.
Yeah, that's why people have said to me too, which I'm not necessarily thinking this is a bad idea, but maybe that I should speak to, a professional like a psychologist. But my view is this type of situation is so unique that I would only really want to talk to someone, and I do talk to those who've been in prison, who are very deep people and can really analyze the issues. But for me to go to a professional, for me to feel that that would be worthwhile, I would have to feel that professional either experience themselves or they have experience with other incarcerated individuals. That's a tough niche to find.
Right.
So
What are your joys now that you're out? What do you find? You said you like spending time with your children. Anything particularly joyful?
I still got a lot of satisfaction out of achieving both at my job and with the legal work, the assistance I'm providing. I did inmates, I should say. I did have a very recent success with an inmate at FCI Milan who was won an appeal and got out 2 years earlier. He actually had to be deported back to Jamaica. He's a Jamaican citizen, but you know, he was thrilled, of course. Those successes to that degree are far and few between, but when you have them, you're very, very pleased and
Right.
joyous for that
You-
person.
Can you tell me how you continue to help and advocate for people of those inside? Please.
Mostly through post-conviction relief motion filings, which are defined as either these days compassionate release filings based on some recent amendments to the United States sentencing guidelines, the federal guidelines. That there's been a movement of late to send more people into home confinement earlier than ever before, because finally the BOP is realizing, though it's existed for decades, that they can save a lot of money, particularly sending the elderly home who are costing them a lot of money in medical care. And those that have very low chances of recidivism because, for instance, they have 0 criminal history points, or they've done a significant percentage of their sentence and have served more than 10 years in federal prison. There are a number of new amendments, including medical related issues too, where historically you had to, for compassionate release, basically show you had a death sentence within a year of the time you're seeking release to home confinement. But now it's been expanded greatly to include the ability to go home if you have to care for a loved one, a family member, including a mother or father who is suffering from significant documented medical conditions. So,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
these are, I'm making these filings, trying to get people out of prison and onto home confinement largely earlier than they otherwise would, based on many of these legal
This
laws.
Sounds like a passion project for you. A
Well, it
project.
is because
you-
I was in that position. I was living like them, so I can be empathetic to exactly what they're thinking. And this is another reason I feel the pressure to take the calls when they call, because I know firsthand what it feels like when you're calling after a half-hour wait and no one picks up the phone. It's very, very difficult mentally, you know. So
You do a lot of kindness. You also do a lot of work for Hinda Institute. Do you want to talk a little bit about your relationship with the Hinda Institute and some of the work you've done for us?
So I was very blessed through a rabbi that my sister knows very well in Skokie, at the Chabad in Skokie, to be introduced to Rabbi Shimon. When I met with Rabbi Shimon, I was convinced immediately that I wanted to become involved in the Hinda Institute. Why? Because the Hinda Institute's mission is very similar to what my mission has been, which is to help inmates, in the Hinda Institute's case, you know, mostly Jewish inmates, but nevertheless, helping inmates who are in need. And not only, and what I loved about your mission is not only helping the inmate, but being of support to the families, because when you're helping an inmate, and their family, you feel even better because the family's going through the same sufferings, if not more than the inmate. So there's a few things I've done. You know, I've become involved in a legal course that is geared toward assisting those who are newly released on issues that are germane to and relevant to those who are newly released with respect to housing, employment, whether or not to continue on with legal pursuits on cases that it might be wise instead to just give up on and focus on the present and the future, and not, you know, looking backwards. So many different areas of advice. We've had a significant number of expert speakers on these topics that we've brought in, and it's been very well received, I believe.
I think the last course we had 57 people
which was
joined, which was our most popular course.
And I'm really, really happy that we've been able to build that and bring in the speakers that we have. I also have, you know, delivered food for, you know, Passover and other holidays where I've been asked to. I'm happy to do that. And also just, and probably the most touching thing for me is being able to study Torah with Rabbi Shimon on Sunday mornings.
Which you do
because I want to say this, what he does that's amazing is, it's not, with him, it's not just a question of teaching, you know, the week's parsha. What he does to begin, which is magical, is he asks you about what's going on with you, and then he relates your life to that weekly parsha, and that is really special.
That's quite skillful. Yeah. Well, we are so proud to have you part of the Hinda Institute. David, you really are a Hinda hero. You've really taken your life, rebuilt it, and become a different person. Your journey is a meaningful journey, and you're making a difference in many people's lives. And we want to thank you for that.
Thank you so much.